The day my mother-in-law threw me out of her mansion was the day she learned a valuable lesson about judging people by appearances. But let me start from the beginning. I met James at a small coffee shop where I worked while finishing my MBA. He was charming, kind, and completely different from his family, or so I thought. Coming from old money, the Blackwells were notorious in our city for their pride and excessive displays of wealth. But James seemed grounded, choosing to drive a modest car and work as a high school teacher rather than join his family's investment firm. What nobody knew, not even James, was that I was Sarah Chen, heiress to the Chen Global Enterprises. My father had taught me the value of making my own way in life. Success tastes sweeter when you earn it yourself, he always said. So there I was serving coffee and studying, while secretly sitting on the board of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. When James proposed after 2 years of dating, I said yes without hesitation. That's when I first met his mother, Victoria Blackwell, in all her designer-clad glory. A barista? She'd sneered, looking me up and down during our first dinner together. James, darling, surely you can't be serious. What about Catherine Montgomery? Her father owns half of downtown. James defended me, but I could see the strain in his smile. Mom, I love Sarah. She's brilliant, kind, and working on her MBA. An MBA from a state school. Victoria scoffed. How quaint. I kept quiet, remembering my father's words about humility. Besides, I was used to being underestimated. What I couldn't get used to was Victoria's constant interference in our lives after the wedding. She insisted we move into the family mansion, a sprawling estate she inherited from her parents. To save money, she said with a pointed look at me. Since some of us aren't fortunate enough to come from means. James thought it was a good idea, and I agreed, not because we needed to save money, but because I wanted to give our marriage a fair chance. That was my first mistake. Life in the Blackwell mansion was like walking through a minefield. Victoria criticized everything. My clothes, my cooking, my background. She'd host elaborate dinner parties and seat me at the far end of the table, away from James and the important guests. Family tradition, she'd say with a cold smile. Though you'd hardly understand tradition, would you, dear? James witnessed it all but remained silent, caught between his mother's manipulation and his wife's unhappiness. That was until Victoria decided to take things further. It happened on our first anniversary. I just finished a video call with my father's company board. In private, of course, when Victoria burst into my room, face red with anger. I saw you, she screamed, waving her phone. Speaking Chinese with some man. I knew you were after James's money, but I never thought you'd stoop to cheating. Before I could explain that I was speaking to my father, she started throwing my clothes out of the closet. Get out of my house, you gold-digging tramp. James rushed in, but instead of defending me, he stood there looking torn. Sarah, maybe you should stay with a friend until we sort this out. That was the moment I realized our marriage was over. Not because of Victoria's accusations, but because my husband had shown his true colors. He wasn't the man I thought I'd married. Actually, I said calmly, pulling out my phone, I think it's time for some truth. I called my lawyer, Andrew, putting him on speaker. Andrew, it's Sarah. Please initiate Protocol Diamond. Victoria laughed. Calling your divorce lawyer already? Good, save us the trouble. Mrs. Blackwell, Andrew's crisp voice cut through her laughter. I'm not a divorce lawyer. I'm the chief legal counsel for Chen Global Enterprises, and I'm calling the police to remove you from Ms. Chen's property. The silence that followed was deafening. What nonsense is this? Victoria sputtered. The mansion you're standing in, I said quietly. I bought it 3 months ago when your family's investment firm was quietly selling assets to cover their losses. You've been living in my house, Victoria. James went pale. Sarah, what are you talking about? I straightened my shoulders, channeling my father's boardroom presence. I'm Sarah Chen, daughter of Michael Chen and majority shareholder of Chen Global Enterprises, and I've had enough of your family's abuse. The sound of police sirens filled the air. Victoria's face turned ashen as 2 police officers entered the mansion. My lawyer, Andrew, had arrived with them, impeccably dressed and carrying a folder of documents. This is ridiculous, Victoria screeched, backing away. This house has been in the Blackwell family for generations. Actually, Andrew said, opening his folder, the property was sold at auction 3 months ago due to the Blackwell Investment Group's financial troubles. Here's the deed, clearly showing Ms. Chen as the legal owner. James stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. You're a Chen. As in Chen Global. The very same. I replied calmly, though it seems your family was too busy judging my job as a barista to notice my last name matched one of the largest corporations in Asia. Victoria lunged for the documents in Andrew's hands, but the police officers stepped between us. This must be forged. The Blackwells would never sell to a Chen. I finished for her. Your late husband did exactly that. He knew your family's company was hemorrhaging money, so he quietly sold this mansion and several other properties. I suspect he never told you because he knew how you'd react. The color drained from Victoria's face. Her late husband, James's father, had passed away 6 months ago, taking many secrets with him, including, it seemed, the truth about their financial situation. Officers, I said firmly, I'd like Mrs. Blackwell and her son removed from my property. They can return tomorrow with proper supervision to collect their personal belongings. You can't do this, Victoria wailed. James, tell her. But James just stood there, shell-shocked. Finally he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. All this time, you were wealthy? You let my mother treat you like that when you could have. When I could have what, James? I interrupted. Bought her respect. Proved my worth with my bank account. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I own. You failed that test spectacularly. As the police escorted them out, Victoria turned back, her designer dress wrinkled from her earlier tantrum. You'll regret this. The Blackwells have influence. Had influence, Andrew corrected smoothly. As of this morning, Chen Global has acquired controlling interests in what remains of Blackwell Investments. Ms. Chen now owns everything. I watched them leave, feeling oddly empty. This wasn't how I'd imagined my marriage ending, but perhaps it was better to learn the truth now rather than years down the line. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of media attention. The story of the humble barista who turned out to be a business heiress was too juicy for the press to ignore. But they got it wrong. They painted it as a revenge story, a calculated takedown of the Blackwell family. The truth was simpler and sadder. I bought the mansion and the company not out of revenge, but as a business investment. Victoria and James showing their true colors was just an unfortunate bonus. 6 months later, I sat in my father's office in Singapore, reviewing quarterly reports. The Blackwell mansion had been converted into a scholarship foundation, providing housing and education for underprivileged students. Victoria and James had moved to a modest apartment across town. Their new reality after the truth about Blackwell Investments' mismanagement came to light. You know, my father said, looking up from his tablet, your mother and I worried when you insisted on making your own way. But you learned something valuable that no business school could teach you. What's that? I asked, though I already knew the answer. That true character shows itself not in how people treat their equals, but in how they treat those they believe to be beneath them. I touched the simple jade pendant he'd given me years ago, a reminder to stay grounded despite our family's wealth. I learned that lesson well, thanks to Victoria Blackwell. A week later, I received a letter from James. He was apologizing, trying to explain himself, saying he changed. I read it once, then fed it through the shredder. Some lessons come too late. The media still occasionally runs stories about us. The wealthy heiress who worked as a barista. The socialite family who lost everything. They call it a modern fairy tale turned upside down. But I know better. It's simply a story about people showing their true colors when they think nobody of consequence is watching. I kept one small photo from my time with the Blackwells, not of James or Victoria, but of the mansion's garden where I'd spent peaceful mornings before anyone else was awake. I planted a row of humble daisies there, much to Victoria's horror. Common flowers, she called them, they don't belong in a Blackwell garden. Those daisies are still there, growing stronger each year, tended now by scholarship students who appreciate their simple beauty. Like those daisies, true worth isn't about pedigree or appearance, it's about authenticity, resilience, and a courage to grow wherever you're planted. As for me, I still stop by that same coffee shop sometimes, order my usual latte, and leave a generous tip. The baristas don't know I own the building, and I prefer it that way. After all, as my father always says, success tastes sweeter when you earn it yourself. And every morning, I remember Victoria's face when she learned the truth, not with satisfaction, but with a kind of sadness. Money can buy many things: mansions, companies, influence. But it can't buy character. That's something you either have or you don't, regardless of what's in your bank account.